All right. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I believe we need a motion to appoint Corey Wright as the clerk pro tem.
So moved.
Is there a
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Mayor Bailey,
Yes.
Mr. Bateman,
Yes.
Mr. Blair,
Under the circumstances, yes.
Mr. Hart,
Yes.
Mr. Ori,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps,
Yes.
Mr. Peng.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, now if you could call the actual roll.
Okay, roll call. Roll call, Mayor Bailey,
Yes.
Mr. Bateman,
Yes.
Mr. Blair,
Yes.
Mr. Hart,
Yes.
Mr. Ori,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps,
Yes.
Mr. Peng.
Yes.
Motion carries. Or I'm sorry, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. With us tonight, we have our Director of Finance, Mark Medler, Assistant City Manager Corey Wright, City Manager Dave Kennedy, City Solicitor Joe Braun, Police Chief Michael Gabrielson, former council members Pat Mays and Todd Osborne, and several esteemed members of our police department. So welcome, everyone. Glad to have you here. The first thing on our agenda is oath of office for our new police officer, Bobby Taylor.
Just you and Michael. Mayor and Council, I have the distinct honor of welcoming Bobby Taylor to the Police Department. Just a little background on Officer Taylor. He comes to us 9 years of service with Coleraine Police Department. 3 years he spent in investigations. During that time, he became a taser instructor and also a force options instructor. And I would just like to thank you and the citizens that continue to support the police department for us to be able to continue to hire today, and especially exceptional officers like Bobby. It's just fantastic for the city, fantastic for the police department. So thank you. And just really quickly in the back, Mr. Taylor, Carl Taylor, Bobby's dad is here, his mom Stephanie, and his daughter Peyton, who will be pinning on his badge. So get ready to come up in a minute.
All right. So before we do the oath of office, welcome to the city. I know you've already done this once, but we like to do this here in front of council and in front of the citizens that you're serving for a few reasons. One, so that we get to know you and see who you are, and vice versa. And oftentimes we don't otherwise get to meet our officers. And also, it's an opportunity for us to express our gratitude for you agreeing to come to work for the city of Loveland, and to let you know that we really appreciate all of our employees, and in particular, I think our police department, given what you all do every day. So that's another reason. And another is to try to impress upon, I think, all new hires that you represent this city when you're both on these streets and when you're in your own home, whether you're wearing our uniform or not, and that we take that very seriously, and that we expect a lot of our employees, certainly including our police officers. But the best reason is we're just happy to have you here, and we wanted to meet you. All right, are you ready?
Yes.
All right, raise your right hand. I state your name.
I, Bobby Taylor,
Solemnly swear that I will
solemnly swear that I will
support the Constitution of the United States,
support the Constitution of the United
the
States,
Constitution of the State of Ohio,
the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
and the Charter and ordinances
and the Charter and ordinances
of the City of Loveland,
of the City of Loveland,
and will obey the laws thereof,
and will obey the laws thereof,
and will faithfully discharge the duties
and will faithfully discharge the duties
of police officer
of police officer
upon which I am about to enter.
upon which I'm about to enter.
Congratulations.
you go.
I told Officer Taylor he could say a few words. I can't. I don't want to take that away from you.
I just want to thank the city of Loveland for the opportunity. I feel that with my experience and the knowledge I brought from Coleraine, I think I'll be a great asset for the city. Just really excited to get started. And I'd like to thank my family. That's it. I'm ready to go. Thanks.
Welcome aboard.
We're glad to have you. Congratulations. Welcome to Loveland. Thank you.
Congratulations, welcome.
Welcome. Gary. It's true.
All right. Y'all staying for this?
Yeah.
All right. All right. We want Scott up here now?
Yep.
Mr. Wisby, if you would.
For those of you that are new, one of the things the city started, actually Corey brought this, is and on top of the fact that we take great pride in swearing in new employees, we also have begun the process to start recognizing employees with after a certain number of years of service. So we're excited tonight to honor Scott Wisby after 15 years. I got to say, there's very few people that work for the city that juggle more things in the course of a day than Scott. Not to mention 15 calls from me and Corey a day, road program, everything that goes on in the city. Scott, there's a tree down, everything that you can imagine. And I've said this before, and I've tried to get this message apart. We have a lot of heroes that work for the city, but our public works department is really, really something. What they do, I get to forward to council emails from residents who were up at 3 a.m. With one of our water employees fixing a water leak at 3 a.m. There's a lot of things you don't see about and you don't know about, and it's important. And they all do this under Scott's leadership, and it's a tough job. There's a lot going on. He's responsible for quite a bit of infrastructure, and he's assisted ably by Cindy, who was here recently. But I just really wanted to salute Scott for all of his years. And I'm sorry, you're supposed to hand that the way this works. So.
Oh, I thought I had other things to hand.
Yeah. No, that's a Scotch. They need this next.
Well, right, but what
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot about that.
about that?
Oh, I forgot about
And
that.
this. Also, if you get that too.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I want to say just a few words. From the moment I had my first ride along as a brand new city council person with Scott. He's been one of my favorite people. Just always smiling, always willing to do anything that needs to be done. Just a great, I think, a fantastic above and beyond public servant for this city. So certainly one of my favorite people in this city. So congratulations and thanks for being here 15. We're looking forward to the next 15.
Thank you. So I'll just thank council and the mayor for all the tools, and we've got a great department. We've came a long way. We have crew leaders now. We have mechanics. We're looking to grow even more in the future. It's been a pleasure to serve the city 15 years. For 10 years, I felt like I was still new here. So every day is a growing experience. We've been through everything: floods, windstorms, snowstorms, you name it. And it's been something, and it's been a pleasure. So this is the first time I've ever got anything like this. So I really appreciate it. I'm very humbled and don't know quite what else to say, but thank you for the opportunity. And I hope to at least make one more milestone here. So I think we're doing it on 5s. I don't have as many as my wife, which is here tonight, and I thank her for her assistance. And we'll see you in a minute, Dave. Thank you.
Do a picture day.
Thanks, sir. I'm so glad to hear. Congratulations. Thank you, sir.
Oh, God, sorry.
Congratulations. Yes. Oh, there's- oh.
Eva. Oh, look what that gets you. Yeah.
I think I've said many times, at least to the mayor, that the people here at City Hall are as close to a family as anyone can have. I know I spend more time with them than I do my own family. If that's the case, Eva's the crazy sister, and and that only begins to touch it. A few things you got to know about working with Eva. If you have an appointment with anybody, add 10 minutes, because they have to walk by Eva's office, and they know her and they hang out for a while. So you wonder why you walk around City Hall and Mandy will typically say, they're already here, they're in there talking to Eva. So that's how things work. She also sings. She snarfs most of the coffee that goes on in this building. But most importantly, Eva was customer service before customer service was cool. And that is what we stand for in this community more than anything. And I hope it's something that stays long after. That always is a big part of this city, is that we are customer service. We treat everybody first rate, and Eva does that all the time. I'm talking weekend stuff that she will do. And I think also an important thing, a bit of a milestone or a tribute or a big accomplishment for Eva is largely goes unrecognized by our residents, because she created what we do have here, which is a one-stop shop. You're building anything in the city. You're not going to Hamilton or Claremont or Warren, seeing the plumbing inspector, but everything is ran through here, and that is a real service to our residents, and they like it. They know where to come. They know what the window is. They'll say, "Where's Eva?" And that comes from 25 years of treating your residents right. So, Eva, thank you. Thanks a lot for doing what we preach, which is customer service. So, thank you.
So I think I knew Eva, 3 seconds before you hugged me. I think maybe 4. Just a ray of sunshine. It's the truth. And I think the epitome of what a public servant should be, the customer service, how she treats our residents, builders, anyone that comes in here is what we want. So we are really lucky to have you, and very lucky to have had you for 25 years, and hope that continues.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Here, sis.
Oh, thank you.
Now you have to speak.
Oh, no.
I'll hold it for you.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor Phelps, Council, and Joe Brown for all your help all these years. And thank you to Dave, who, when, 25 years I worked for a lot of city managers and a lot of mayors, and I've learned a lot. I went from secretary to where I am now, and most of my customers are some of my best friends and family, and I've just been, I look at it as not a government job. I look at it as true public service. And I think that's a big difference. Like, I was in the corporate world and I didn't feel fulfilled. I didn't feel I had a purpose. And I feel I have a purpose. I feel like I have a purpose doing what I'm doing now. And I love driving down and seeing all the redevelopment, the new development, and working on big projects or small fences and sheds and pools, and I'm just so grateful. And I want to say congratulations, Scott, on his award, and thank you for his support and encouragement. When I have great days, he's, encouraging and uplifting. When I have bad days, he's the same, and he's my rock and my best friend. And I've learned a lot from this industry with him and his time at as township trustees and other positions. And I appreciate his knowledge and what he's taught me. And thank you to Corey, who created this recognition program and who's already dove in and what can I do to help? I want to learn, and backs us up and wants to learn the system. And thank you to Mark that laughs at my jokes, and Michael, who's already in my discussions with him. It's a team player. There was a time here, I won't talk too long, and sorry, Dave. But there was a time here we heard all the time, it's not my job, it's not my job. And I think we got a really good organization here. And I'm not just talking City Hall, I'm talking PD, fire department, and police, where they work together, not against each other. And I feel like that would be great. The community with us and council, we all have the same goal, whether we don't agree or not. We want Loveland to be a better place to work, live, and play. So I hope we all remember that. And thank you. I've talked too long and too loud, as Dave will tell you. When I call him from down the hallway, he says, "You don't have to call me. I can hear you." Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. You look too young to be here for 25 years. Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you. One more. Oh, pictures. That's how you do. That's how you do.
Thank you all so much.
No, I'm good.
All right. Up next is open forum. Ken Bottom. Podium.
This is my second appearance before council concerning traffic enforcement on Wall Street, or as we call it on Wall Street, the Speedway. David Kennedy has been very receptive to thoughts on signage, speed registering signs, and speed bumps. I understand that permanent flashing your speed is signs are in the next year's budget. Otherwise, not much has changed, and I think with no enforcement, regular travelers will soon ignore these new signs. Our previous police chief explained to me that speed enforcement on Wall Street just isn't practical, as there is no area to place a radar unit and nowhere to pull cars over. Yet Wall Street is 3 lanes and Kemper Lane is 2 lanes, and there's a lot of police presence on Kemper. I hope our new police chief has other thoughts. The problem seems to be slow traffic on Loveland Avenue, and when they make the turn onto Wall Street, it's an open stretch and away they go. With school back in session, the problem is really bad in the morning when driving students are late. Milford has a very similar condition. When you leave Milford going east towards the river and Round Bottom Road on Cleveland, it's the same as Wall Street, a sudden straightaway through a residential neighborhood. Milford considered the safety and comfort of its citizens and installed stop signs at all 3 cross streets and installed speed bumps in the middle of each block. Speaking of comfort, I'm sure everyone who lives or works close to downtown are regularly assaulted by loud exhaust. There are laws against this, but this is also unenforced. I requested information from the Loveland Police Department, and the report stated that between March 1st and July 1st, there was a grand total of 1 citation issued for loud exhaust. More enforcement would be greatly appreciated. Also, the parks in our area are well marked with signs and marked with crossings lines, except Kiwanis Park. Is this private property, or is there some other legal reasoning? On a party note, I find Loveland City Council or City Manager Dave Kenny and Lucy Mulvaney from the engineer's office to be great communicators. Lucy even visited me due to construction at their office. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next is review and approval of minutes from the August 9th, 2022 meeting. Is there any changes, additions? We have a motion to approve as written.
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Call the roll, please.
Mayor Bailey,
Yes.
Mr. Bateman,
Yes.
Mr. Blair,
Yes.
Mr. Hart,
Yes.
Mr. Ori,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps,
Yes.
Mr. Pang.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, so next we have a public hearing. We need a motion to open that hearing.
I'll move to open the public hearing pursuant to section 115102B1 of the Planning and Zoning Code for the City of Loveland.
Is there a second?
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bateman,
Yes.
Mr. Blair,
Yes.
Mr. Hart,
Yes.
Mr. Ori,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps,
Yes.
Mr. Pang,
Yes.
Mayor Bailey.
Yes. All right, there's actually no one signed up to speak at the public hearing. So could we have a motion to close the public hearing?
Move to close.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Mr. Blair,
Yes.
Mr. Hart,
Yes.
Mr. Ori,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps,
Yes.
Mr. Pang,
Yes.
Mayor Bailey,
Yes.
Mr. Bateman.
Yes.
Public hearings.
All right, I think we'll wait till we get to that resolution before we discuss it, before we let Corey discuss it. Let's go to the second reading of the ordinance. When you're ready, Mr. Wright, if you could read that.
Yes, ma'am. Second reading of the ordinance. Ordinance establishing the compensation and classification for the position of water treatment plant superintendent and repealing ordinance 2022-39.
Is there any comment on the ordinance? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Hart,
Yes.
Mr. Ori,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps,
Yes.
Mr. Pang,
Yes.
Mayor Bailey,
Yes.
Mr. Bateman,
Yes.
Mr. Blair.
Yes.
Ordinance 2022-74 is adopted by virtue of a vote of 7-0.
Mr. Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. So this item is a resolution before you tonight. We have a resolution for the establishment of Special Planning District number 19. per Part 11, Title 3, Chapter 1151 of the Loveland Code of Ordinances. This is for the Oak Street development. Let me change the view here for the folks at home. For the Oak Street development, Planning and Zoning Commission case 2022-04. So this project has been through multiple iterations. This legislation, which adopted by council, if you were to adopt it, would result in the adoption of a concept plan, development guidelines, and written findings of fact pursuant to 115103 of the Special Planning District Regulations for an initiated SPD application submitted by Hunt and Whitaker LLC. This would establish an SPD with 6 single-family detached structure residential homes on approximately 1.145 acres located at 102 Oak Street. Prior to the establishment of the SPD, there are the concept plan, development guidelines, and written findings of fact. Without belaboring the point too much on this, the history of this project's been through the Planning and Zoning Commission. They favorably recommended the initiation to council. Ultimately, notice of final action was transmitted to council, and then council set a public hearing, which we had this evening. The property is zoned RMD and Historic District. The applicant proposes lots in the range between 4,195 square feet to 6,902 square feet, with a dedicated open space lot comprising 42.5% of the project area. Looking at the development characteristics here, the SPD in this instance is proposed to preserve the hillside and to basically shift the density to the area of the site most suitable for development. Just looking at the zones, the historic district zone encompasses about 0.55 acres of the site on that. And with that, it is very steep, very wooded. Everybody's familiar with that site. Looking at the zoning code really doesn't differentiate for steep slopes and kind of densities. It just says, the densities, lot setbacks, this and that. So in this instance, it would seem appropriate to shift that to the more developable portion of the site and ensure preservation of that valuable hillside area. The development proposes minimum lot widths of 36 feet, minimum front yard setbacks of 20 feet, minimum side yard setbacks of 3 feet, and rear yard setbacks of 20 feet. The height, it would be a 35-foot max, and the development materials are brick and fiber cement siding. And the development details are presented in the memorandum. So there are required findings of fact that council has to adopt, and there are specific findings of fact meeting the requirements of 115103 regarding concentration of retail or service-oriented community establishments, land occupied by substantial natural characteristics, and I'm summarizing here, or lands that permit ingenuity, imagination, and design efforts on behalf of the builders to meet open space and land use intensity objectives. So in looking at this, there are occupied substantial natural characteristics worthy of preservation, namely the hillside that we referenced, and then also the single-family detached structure character of the development produces a development that respects existing densities and land configurations in the immediate vicinity, thereby satisfying Section 115103B and 03C of the district regulations. The finding of fact are presented for council's consideration and are attached as Exhibit A to the proposed legislation. Additionally, in the memo, you'll see that there is a required concept plan, and after multiple iterations with the developer, they were able to provide the required materials meeting the requirements of Section 1151.04 regarding, and those requirements are spelled out. It's A through F, and that City Council does have the authority to regulate the location, size, and intensity of such uses, and so the required concept plan is included as Exhibit B to the proposed legislation. And finally, with regard to Exhibit C, 115105 requires that council adopt guidelines for development of the special planning district area. And so those can be either incorporated as a concept development plan or can be contained as a separate written text. The applicant's done a bit of both here in that, and they have met those requirements. They are bullet pointed in the memorandum as well with those specific items noted, with Exhibit C incorporating those to the proposed legislation. With that, the policy options this evening, and I guess I would be remiss if I didn't mentioned that in addition to if this is approved, then we go back through the process. We go through the zoning map, the formal zoning map amendment process before planning and zoning and council. And then there's also an additional layer with HPPC, the Historic Preservation Planning Commission, which will regulate specific design aesthetics in the project, color, material, renderings, those kind of things. And so you have that those multiple layers in that, and also subdivision site plan review. So the policy options this evening, you can adopt this resolution and adopt the concept plan development guidelines and findings of fact pursuant to the requirements of Chapter 1151, thereby establishing the special planning district and allowing the project to proceed. You could elect to decline the proposed legislation and it would not proceed, or you could require additional changes or modifications to that. And this would not have any fiscal impact associated with the adoption of this proposed legislation. And the recommendation is for the adoption of the resolution, approve the proposed resolution resulting in the adoption of the concept plan, development guidelines, and findings of fact pursuant to Chapter 1151, Section 1151.03 of the Special Planning District Regulations for this initiated SPD application submitted by Hunt & Whitaker, LLC.
Thank you. Mr. Kennedy, did you have any follow-up?
No, this part of the process is, as we know, that the SPD process is very detailed. It runs itself through P&Z and City Council twice. If you recall, City Council back in 2018 or 2019, we modified the SPD regulations to add an additional public hearing early on in the process. This part, if council moves forward with this, it will then circle back, and the formal map amendment process, as any other typical map amendment process, would begin back with the P&Z, back to council. At that point, in addition to just a public hearing notice in the newspaper, all adjoining property owners will receive a letter, and then it'll circle back to council. The other thing that I think is important, and this council should be commended for it, is that in addition to the public notification that you added that on there, is that you approved design guidelines, and this particular property falls within the city's historic preservation boundaries. So any of the aesthetics, anything that will go in front of the Historic Preservation and Planning Commission at some point is probably very similar to when they go through site plan review. That should be a comfort to council, because and the city just recently retained the services of a historic preservation architect who will, much like Mr. Braun sits up here with council as a solicitor, that person will sit up here with the Historic Preservation and Planning Commission to guide them through the various sundry aesthetics about the materials and colors and what goes on. And that was a big step. Montgomery's been sort of holding our hand for this historic preservation. As anybody knows, they've been doing that. So I would think that's a comfort level for the adjoining property owners, that you're going to get a product that was at one point in time, 6 times this number of units, down to now 6, and also one that fits much better into the neighborhood, and also one that will get a fairly detailed eye on behalf of your Historic Preservation and Planning Commission.
Thank you. Mr. Bateman is our rep on
Yeah,
commission. Would you like to speak?
sure, I would. Thank you. I just have a couple of questions. I think we've, Dave, you were mentioning, Mr. Kennedy was mentioning the Historic Preservation Planning Commission and their role in this. I'm assuming that would come after the map amendment, because it's not necessarily tied to an SPD regulation, so it almost has to be a subsequent, but also in parallel path with the site planning. Is that correct? That's
Correct.
Kind of how that would be
And
sequenced?
Yeah, and Corey and Eva have let them know about that from the get-go. After the map amendment, if the map amendment is ultimately approved and that property is physically remapped, recolored as an SPD, Corey will then walk them through 2 remaining processes that are somewhat administrative roles that you're not involved in as council. That is a site plan review. That's sort of, they get down into the weeds about a lot of things, and then also the historic preservation. So yeah, you're right, Mr. Bateman, is they would not proceed with that until they know that basically the project's moving forward.
Okay, thank you. And another question that I had was around, even within P&Z, we were debating a lot about why this is going out to become a special planning district, why this application, considering the size of the parcels. And I think the argument in favor of initiating the process was the split zone nature of the project. I think Mr. Wright did a good job explaining the desire of the applicant to essentially shift the zoning which exists in the historic district to the residential medium density. My question is really around, is there another mechanism by which they could achieve that same goal, or is SPD sort of the best way for that process to be initiated so that they can essentially create that that mix that they're looking for?
Let me just jump in a little bit before Corey, because he has a lot of detail on that. But I will say, having been a part of following this process, I would say because of the SPD process, the Planning and Zoning Commission had a lot of control. Namely, one of the concerns of those residents was those rooftop decks, which have went from being shifted to the front to being removed. That's the power you have with an SPD. And I think that was very evident. It's supposed to be, an SPD is supposed to be where, this isn't the right word, where you're wheeling and dealing, but it's where you make agreements. In lieu of this, you get this. In lieu of parking, in lieu of all of these items, we want this. Everything the city did in the SPD process was for the good of the neighbors on the rear, point blank. City never went here, just like the city did with Chimney Ridge. Just like the city did to get the product they got at Chimney Ridge. It was about those adjoining property owners. This was all about the property owners to the rear of this property. So I just want to jump in because Corey's done a wonderful job. But this process has been going on so long. He's been here since March. So I just want to throw that in. Corey, sorry.
Certainly. And compounding and building upon what Mr. Kennedy said in regards to the SPD. I mean, certainly you could approach it from a variance perspective with the Board of Zoning Appeals. But at the end of the day, I think that because the SPD is a voluntary process and the applicant actually seeks that out, it's akin to where in my prior employer, we had planned unit developments. And so that is truly an opportunity to negotiate in that regard because of the voluntary status and the ability of planning and zoning and council to really drive that process in a manner that respects the neighborhood. With variances, the problem I see with variances is if you grant too many variances, you should just change the rules. And that becomes, they tend to sort of compound upon one another. Each one builds upon another. And before you know it, the way I look at it is if you grant one variance, then you're granting 5, then you're granting 10, and then where does it stop in that? And so with this, you have that ability to negotiate that and look at the unique characteristics of the site. And then the other part of that too, you have the ability to really lock that open space in. Whereas, and we can continue to go through that process with the additional steps, the site plan review, the platting, the HPPC and all that, and really further define that and finalize that ownership in that. But at the end of the day, this sets forth that this half an acre that is, substantially wooded, slopes, the whole 9 yards, is to be preserved, and nobody should ever come back and talk about it because it was voluntarily sought by the applicant and not something that was an afterthought after the fact, or just we won't deal with that now. We'll just deal with what we can cherry pick at this time. So really, I think the process is very beneficial in that, and it really allows for that unique development. I think what Mr. Kennedy indicated, Chimney Ridge is an example of that as well. And you really, I think you get a better quality development with that as opposed to just a by permit type. Just come in and you're looking at permits and there's no control. So,
thank you. So yeah, basically it's the best instrument we have that allows for sort of a negotiation through several different bodies, but also remains site specific to where those changes are only in reference to that particular project.
Yes.
So I think from the P&Z standpoint, I was beneficial, similar to Mr. Wright, in the sense that I joined planning and zoning right around the same time that this project was being initiated in this iteration of it. I recall having seen it on my radar when I was not on planning and zoning in its previous forms when it was really a totally different project. So I think I commend the developer for sort of working and listening to the community as they started to make recommendations about what this project should look like. I believe, as with the majority of my planning and zoning commission colleagues, that it represents a good mix of the different types of development that is in that neighborhood. It meshes well with some of the sort of townhome structures that are going up the hill on 2nd Street. I think when given the choice between, a multifamily versus a single family project, I think that this meets the needs of some of the comprehensive plan and as well as the downtown comprehensive downtown plan. So I'm in favor of this development. I think it is one of those opportunities where everyone has sort of worked together to establish a good compromise to where the initial request was coming from. So I think that's reflected in my vote from P&Z, and that's how I intend to vote in favor of this development today.
Thank you. Mr. Ori?
Andy just touched on some of the things I was going to touch on, but one thing is this started probably, I don't know when the first application was, 18, 19, somewhere, and it was 64 units, a multifamily. The developer and the architect, Rob Sabo, have worked very well with the city and with planning and zoning, as well incorporating all the people, the neighbors around this development. I recall the planning and zoning open forum, one of them that they had, no one spoke because they had already answered all the questions. I think it's a great product. It looks great, and I'll be supporting it too.
Thank you. Any other comment? Mr. Blair?
I have 3 questions / observations. So the site plan review, will that include study of like drainage issues, retention requirements and that sort of thing?
Yes, I mean, we have to meet the city stormwater regulations and things like that as part of the development process.
Because I mean that hill is a potential disaster. I'm just curious as we make sure that whatever retention we have to do is taken care of.
Well, one of the unique things about this concept plan, if council were to adopt that tonight, if you look, there's a plan sheet in there that references to clearing and grading limits, and they're generally on top of the flattest part of the site. In the hillside, it was very clear in our discussions that was to remain undisturbed in every respect.
Okay. Secondly, at some point along the way, I would hope that there would be some discussion of what the facades will look like and the detail. You and I spoke a little bit about it this afternoon. I think there's a tremendous opportunity to make to identify these 6 units with some real character and make them a sort of a symbol of what Loveland is becoming. I mean, many of you have seen the pictures of the painted ladies, the Victorians in San Francisco. I think they're all very similar structure and style for their period, and they're all painted different colors. And I think that would be something terrific. And the last thing, I think if these have flat roofs, I think they'd be perfectly suitable for renewable energy opportunities, solar or something like that. I'd like to at least have some discussion about that along the way. And like my colleagues, Mr. Ori and Mr. Bateman, this project has gone through a number of iterations, and I think this is the best that we can expect. And the care is being taken with the development of it, and I intend to support it.
Thank you. Any other comment? Mr. Hart?
Yeah, for me, just simply and quickly, I don't know that I've seen a demonstrated need for this type of housing. I don't think we have a lack of it here that would allow me or compel me to want to support an SPD that would create more density up there. So for me, I'm gonna have to be a no.
Any other comment, Vice Mayor?
Just that I think this meets the requirements, and we can I think support the findings of fact that support that this is a good SPD project for a number of reasons because of the hillside and other things. And then our Planning and Zoning Commission has approved it. I think the things that resonate with me on this is, and was in Mr. Wright's memo, is it conforms to the adjacent residential densities. So it's not like it's going to be a sore thumb in the rest of the context of the area. I think the setbacks are good for this as well. And the aesthetics and the concept plan, I think, is a good one. Obviously, there's a long way to go to the final product. But I would just say that I'm in favor of it because, again, I've seen the long game here, and this is by far the best and most appropriate improvement for this property that's come before us in the years that we've been considering them.
Thank you. Any further comment, Mr. Ping?
Just a couple of things. I spoke last time we discussed this, that concerns about just some of the aspects of the size of the project as much as anything. It's a fairly small plot of land that we're talking about. And, one of the things that concerns me is just the ability to kind of go the direction of what Mr. Wright was referring to with annexation. That when you start going down this path, where does it stop? Is a half acre too small to do a special planning district because somebody wants to do something special? Having said that, since the last meeting, I had an exciting evening reading the Planning and Zoning Code 2 or 3 times just to see what it said and make sure I was familiar with it. And in looking at that, there really isn't anything that I see that says that there is a nature that's associated with size of the project or so forth. And so, that kind of dissuades me from making an issue of that. The things that I think still are there, and I did talk with Mr. Wright about this last week. One of those things is the hillside protection. The purpose and scope that's listed in and is the reason why we're saying this should be the case. It doesn't, I guess I'll put it this way. It doesn't matter how pretty the houses are. It doesn't matter this and that and the other so much as are we meeting the purpose of what the documents say that we're supposed to be doing. And so the purpose that's stated there of providing the flexibility of dealing with these sorts of situations. One of the things that I think has been characterized is we're saving this hillside section of trees. And so I think at some point in this process, and Mr. Wright can speak to this certainly much better than I can, but he assures me that there is a part of this that has to do with what the longevity of that is, how it's taken care of. If there were to be something like a lightning strike that tears up the trees or they're falling over, whatever, who is it that's going to pay to go in and have an arborist clean all that up and take care of it? Who's going to take care of the regular maintenance of that property so that it remains the quality that it's supposed to be? And Mr. Wright has assured me that that's something that can be written into the document so that that's taken care of. And I believe you said it was potentially the homeowners that take on that responsibility. Maybe you could just elaborate on what we talked about.
So there's a couple of ways to do that. I mean, they could form an entity. They could do a 1/6 deed restriction and covenants and restrictions. And for that, you would find that in a title search with some covenants and restrictions that are defined, or there may be another party that could hold ownership to that with the capability to hold that. But in any event, I think that would be, prior to the issuance of a building certificate, prior to the issuance of a subdivision plat and a site plan approval, or even a zoning map amendment, that has to be firmed up. So,
right. So I think, as a consideration of our vote, that is an important aspect because it doesn't do us any good to vote on this from a basis of protecting the land and then find out there's some loophole in there that can be used to allow somebody to come in and destroy the thing that we're trying to protect. The other thing that I'm just curious about, and this I just noticed this actually as I was scrolling through this evening, there are some renderings that are provided that show driveways that are coming into the road at a rather awkward angle that would not fit with the road that's there now. And maybe this is in here and I just missed it, but what is the process? I guess, is the developer going to take care of resiting the road, or do they work within that, or how is that going to play out?
They would have to meet with our city engineer to make sure that the driveway slopes and aprons and the approaches are appropriate. And if there is, again, this is part of that process. If there is some modification required, we would require that as part of that review process. And there is a typical drive section that's provided there. So the road has a significant kind of a negative slope heading this way. And Cindy's seen more of these than all I've seen in 3 careers. But I've reviewed a few of these typical sections. And I think that basically you have to make sure that there's an appropriate approach, that it doesn't adversely impact the road, and that drainage and storm sewer is modified appropriately if necessary in that. And so with that process, in that review process, there'll be that detailed review by the city engineer on that. So I can imagine, and then one step further with permitting, then we're going to look at that too for the individual lots.
Sure.
So.
Well, and like I say, it's one rendering. It's actually on packet page 42.
Mm-hmm.
There's one rendering there. It's not like it's an elaborate plan or anything. It's a rendering that shows a rather abrupt change to the roadway that's currently there. And so from a standpoint of, again, fiscal impact on the city, we don't want to create a situation where we have to make, where we're obligated to make those kind of changes, I don't think, as a part of this. So anyway, it's just a point of consideration, I guess. For me, I guess where I come down on this is I'm not terribly excited about the project just from a perspective of the things I've already mentioned. I don't, the size of the project and so forth, but at the same time, I think I don't think it's a bad project. It's more the precedent aspect that I'm concerned about, of just having such a small project that has limited benefits in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. So I will be a reluctant yes. Thank you.
Any further comment or questions? All right, I guess I think kudos to the developer and to our staff and to planning and zoning, because this has been a long process and to get us to the point we are tonight. And I really appreciate Mr. Wright memo laying out everything for us as clearly as you did. I always think we need to be cautious and leery when we're making these decisions of creating SPDs, which sort of it's a big variance in and of itself, if you will, that you don't want to change the character of a neighborhood. So precedent setting is important, but I think each project has to stand on its own. And this particular project, if it were brought to us, I think even one road over would not be appropriate in a row of houses that are all the same. Whereas that particular location, it's literally across the street from an apartment complex, from a low water tower. And if you throw a ball over that apartment complex, you'll hit homes that are very similar to what's being proposed here. So I think in this particular instance, this project makes sense. It certainly meets our requirements for an SPD to go forward. And its location, being so close to downtown, this is the type of development that I think people are looking for, where they don't have to take their cars out to go spend an evening out, can just walk down the hill. So for me, I think this project makes sense, and I think allowing this to go forward makes sense. With that, can you read the resolution, please?
Resolution adopting findings of fact, conceptual plan, and development guidelines for the establishment of a special planning district number 19 in accordance with Part 11, Title 3, Chapter 1151 of the Loveland Code of Ordinances.
Thank you. Any comment on the legislation? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Ori,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps,
Yes.
Mr. Ping,
Yes.
Mayor Bailey,
Yes.
Mr. Bateman,
Yes.
Mr. Blair,
Yes.
Mr. Hart.
No.
Motion carries 6-1.
All right. Mr. Wright, when you're ready.
Thank you, Mayor. Second item I have before council this evening is the award of professional design and construction management services for fire station, for future, I will say that, future Fire Station 63. And before us tonight, really, we have this legislation. This legislation would allow the city manager to enter into a contract for professional design and construction management services with MSA Design for the development of a schematic and final design documents, architectural engineering plans, construction plans, preparation of bid documents for other professional services pertaining to the bidding and construction management process for Fire Station 63 relocation, and would further authorize the expenditure of an amount not to exceed $293,250. Excuse me. So with that, given the fact this station's been around, it's served the community very well for almost 50 years, 5 decades now. In 2020, the city manager communicated the need to form a relocation focus group to assist the city in assessing the current station and the future needs of the fire station and the operation of that. And so with that, the committee was tasked with evaluating the recent study, evaluating recommended site locations, working with LSFD and city staff, and working on kind of a preliminary design, and also looking at funding mechanisms. So there were a number of appointees to that, and we thank those committee members for their work, and they began that process really in August of 2020. So when they began that process, there was an in-depth study that MSA completed in May of 2021. They met to review site suitability reports, subsequent to that, the site at 220 East Loveland Avenue was recommended as the best site to move forward. So later in 2021, council approved the acquisition of that and the demolition of the former lodge that was there. And now since that time, the demolition efforts have been completed and the site has been seeded strawed. We're ready. It's ready. It's a blank slate essentially for council. And so with that, following these general demolition activities, City Manager Kennedy and I worked with Chief Huber to develop an RFQ. So we put out an RFQ for to solicit interested firms to provide qualification statements. To call them statements of qualification. In that, 7 firms responded, and with that, the City Manager Kennedy, I, and Mr. Chief Huber met to review those qualifications with the goal of shortlisting not less than 3 firms per the requirements of Section 15369 of the Ohio Revised Code. So these shortlisted firms were then invited to submit proposals, more formal proposals, and those firms were App Architecture Design, KZF, and MSA. And so, consistent with the requirements of 15369 ORC, they provided those proposals. The proposals were submitted at the end of July. Again, we indicated as part of that process, a successful firm will be able to complete a wide range of professional design, construction management services in contemplation of completing this project, and also clarified that the city may seek to do what's called a design bid build or construction manager at risk process. Either way, consistent per 153.691, the RFP did not require responding firms to provide any form of fee estimate or proposal. Each firm that was invited provided an extensive proposal. They were all great proposals, very well done. But at the end of the day, the ad hoc review committee met and looked at those and had an extensive review of that. And really, it was determined that MSA Design provided the most responsive proposal and should be the top ranked proposal to be recommended to proceed for award. And a key component of that is their prior experience with the site. They work through the acquisition, the site, the needs assessment, the site assessment process. They really were the best fit for that to move forward. And so their base proposal, what is included as an attachment, Exhibit A to the legislation. They did provide us, although not solicited, with a base fee of $255,000 to complete the design work, and that is partitioned off in the memo, broken down into multiple phases. Additionally, they proposed some other services that we could handle on an a la carte basis, meaning we could contract with them or we could use other firms that we've worked with to complete the same work in coordination in that. There are some other considerations. It is a risk for essential facility. We do have to engineer it for the occupant load for storm shelter requirements. We do have to look at potential MEP, which is mechanical, electrical, and plumbing services, which could be accommodated as an addendum to the contract. And with that, and past experience, I've built a couple fire stations and been through that process, and my familiarity with that is generally design build. So with a design bid build or a true design contract, it is appropriate to pursue a contingency and authorize that to allow for things that come up during design. And so when you do that, I would ask for an additional 15% contingency on top of the base amount and authorize the expenditure not to exceed $293,250. So there's several considerations for council. You can approve the contract and authorize the expenditure as proposed in the legislation. Authorize the city manager to negotiate. What you have before you is a red line. Obviously, that red line needs to go through our city solicitor's review to make sure that literally all the I's are dotted, all the T's are crossed. The other thing council could do is to modify the proposed legislation to only include the base amount of $255,000 and forego the recommended 15% contingency, or you could elect to direct us to pursue a professional design contract with one of the other firms. We'd have to review that, or you could elect not to move forward at this time. So if awarded, there is a fiscal impact. It would be $293,250, which would authorize the base proposal plus contingency if warranted, sort of those odds and ends of things as you get into design. The recommendation here would be to approve the requested legislation, awarding the contract, authorizing the city manager to execute the design contract and any addendums thereto up to the authorized amount of $293,250 based on the scope of services proposal provided to the city by MSA Design.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Any comments or questions, Mr. Ping?
Before we go on, the clerk's computer has fallen asleep during Mr. Wright's discussion. And so maybe make sure that it's still recording as it should be.
At least it's only the computer that fell asleep. Mr. Wright's discussion.
Glad somebody picked up on that.
Still recording.
Okay, we're good. All right. Any comments or questions? Mr. Hart.
Mr. Wright, you mentioned you've been through this process a couple times with the previous employer. Is this number commensurate with what you would expect to see?
So the process that we went through, we really, because it was a suburban context, we had the opportunity to deploy more of a design build solution. This is a unique site, so the design bid build where you actually have a true design. It's a historic preservation regulated site. So, in my experience, I think that you're looking at, probably if you look at the base amount and you look at the cost of the total project, 8% of the project would be architectural engineering plans, and then 8% contract administration. That's what we saw as set asides in our design build contracts. They're sort of buried in that. The proposals look different. With the design build, you literally get, a package of plans, you get a bid document, you get the whole 9 yards, and then you're literally picking which design, who came up with the best design, who came up with the layout that looks best. With this, we're going to design this literally from the ground up, and so those fees would incorporate that. So,
okay. And lastly, what the 15% contingency that you're looking for? What kind of things would be potentially that be used for?
so we could use that for, again, some of those add-on items for additional MEP work. The mechanical, electrical, plumbing work. If there's geotechnical, we would do some geotech work to make sure, because it's in an area, it's sort of near a creek, it's sort of at the bottom of a ridge. We want to take some soil borings and all that to make sure that we don't need to do special footer design. If you needed to do exceptional footer design or whatever foundation work, that probably could be a contingency in that as well. And again, that's not saying that we have to spend that, but at least we have some cushion in that if we need to be responsive to keep the design process moving.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Vice Mayor?
Maybe this is for Mr. Medler, but is this coming out of this year's budget, next year's budget combination, and has it been budgeted for?
Well, I think for next year.
It will spread over 2 budget periods. Very small amount will come out of the 2022 budget. Typically, we run these through the 29 account of the fire EMS levy. That's where those are structured. So we would anticipate that we'll really probably won't get rolling until Joe needs to do what he has to do. Let's just say we really get started sometime in mid-September. We will probably see a couple billing cycles before the end of the year. We're already full-fledged into the 23 budget, and I've already factored that in. So it'll be spread over two budget periods.
And was this the amount that was budgeted for, or
we did not have any budgeted amount in 2022?
Okay.
We were going to hold off a little bit. We got started on the RFQ and the RFP, and at that point we felt we need to get moving. Probably a construction date. Best case scenario, the construction of the new station would be in 2024, maybe being bid out and full package ready to go at the end of 23.
Any other questions or comments?
I just add.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to add one thing that part of the appeal of this site always was O'Bannon coming in from the back, and the fact that that would allow for the pull-through bays. Lest that, again, that was one of the primary reasons we needed to move out of 63. Primary reason we need to move out of 63 is at some point in time we touch it. We're no longer grandfathered. Elevator, storm shelter, everything starts to kick in, and it's simply not functional. But if you've ever seen our fire trucks back into Station 63, that was the real appeal. So what we're doing in the side, what your staff is doing behind the scenes, is we're working with Choice 1 engineers now to deal with the storm drainage. You will likely see O'Bannon on the 2023 road program, so we can make that as much width as can be. We can work on the turn radiuses. Those are all being done in the behind the scenes to set this up for perfect flow of the emergency units on their response. Remember that, and I know that this was the message we received from Chief Huber, and I think it was the message that came clearest through MSA. This is going to be unique. It's going to be built inside of basically a residential neighborhood of the city. And I think the end result, you're going to see a very residential feel, dormers, and so on and so forth. So it's going to be functional. It's going to fit, but it's really going to be a unique design. And Mr. Phelps, we do intend to use, we are looking to, as I spoke to you before about the interest in Station 63 has set up the possibility that we may be working on allowing an option to be secured. I would anticipate that not in the too distant future, we'll be bringing legislation to you to transfer Station 63 to the CIC. Any funding we receive on annual options, which would be potentially 22 and 23, would be used to offset the design fees. So we just don't know what that would be. We do anticipate coming forward to CIC on that. So that's just found money is what it is. But the interest in that building is so significant that we would be hooking our wagon to somebody on whatever fee we end up deciding it should be. So I just wanted to throw that in there because that would Chief Huber would say that if he was here.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Bateman?
Just a question and then another sort of ancillary point. So, Mr. Wright mentioned, I think, something about MSA's experience in the site. Have we worked with MSA before?
They were, when you formed Station 63, I had to have the services of someone to help us. They did a lot of the pencil sketches. They did a lot of the studies.
Okay.
We used MSA. They are a premier. They, Desmond, who's doing the design for your parking garage, only does parking garages. MSA only does emergency service buildings. They primarily focus on police stations, fire stations, governmental facilities. Yeah. They obviously came with the most knowledge. I think you're getting a little bit of a courtesy discount because they know they've already done some of the work.
Okay.
They were integral in that committee recommending to you that you select that site of the two sites.
That's okay. So the renderings that we saw from the focus group
MSA.
were MSAs. Okay. All right. That explains that. And then and looking at their work, I think on their website, they've done a lot of municipal buildings, fire stations, a lot of local fire stations, and each one, to your point, Mr. Kennedy, is sort of a different look based off of what the community, I would imagine, expected. So. And then I just wanted to point out that you mentioned in a previous conversation about the Historic Preservation Planning Commission and the architect, the on retainer architect for that commission. I would imagine that would be an opportunity, especially when we're talking about design, when we're the client, that we could use those guidelines as at least a reference point and maybe get out in front of some of those designs, understanding what
Yes, it was also
would like to do.
It was important, I think, for my own saving face that the potential parking garage and the fire station all were within the boundaries of the historic preservation, meaning they have to go in before that review, and both structures are through that. So the fire station, at some point, MSA is going to have to sit in front of the Historic Preservation Commission.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else? All right, can you read the resolution, please?
Sorry. I'll find it here. Resolution authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement with MSA Design for professional design and construction management services relative to the City of Loveland Fire Station 63 relocation project.
Any comment on the legislation? Call the roll, please.
Vice Mayor Phelps?
Yes.
Mr. Ping?
Yes.
Mayor Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mr. Ori?
Yes.
Resolution 2022-76 is adopted by virtue of a vote of 7-0.
Mr. Kennedy.
So basically 2 years in the making, we're here before council to present legislation that will authorize me to execute an agreement with Mrs. Joan Brogan to purchase 501 Loveland Madeira Road. The city has owned Chestnut Street property, which is 8.33 acres, for 43 years. And since for many, many years, the city has dreamed of developing that property. Along the way, the hurdles that cities dealt with, which is study after study, environmental study after environmental study, has shown that major remediation is needed before that property can be developed. For years, we've just thrown studies at it, hoping that some magic would happen. So in early 2022, the effort to finally turn Chestnut Street property into a tax-creating, job-creating piece of property took a boost when the city was awarded $3.3 million in funding through the state of Ohio's Brownfield Remediation Program. The remediation progress is well in line. It's under the watchful eye of Corey. With that secured, the city really turned their focus back to the other key element to making that a prime piece of property, and that is access to Loveland Madeira Road. There's no doubt that anyone who's looked at that property knew that it touches a railroad, that a spur is a doable thing. But this council, I know for a fact, knows that with the property inevitably going to be commercial, office, or light industrial, running that traffic through Main Street is not something the city wants. It's not something the residents of that area would want. And it's certainly not something that even a developer would want. So with that, we've really focused on how do we get to Loveland Madeira Road. We've looked at easements. We've looked at property purchases. We looked at every little zig and zag we can get. But through it all, 501 Loveland Madeira Road has been our main focus. It's a 0.647 acre parcel. It runs right up to Valley View, and it is something that we've always geared with. I've had conversations with the owners of that property for quite a while, and always positive, but it wasn't a number that we felt comfortable with at that time. The city, one of the reasons we always eyed that property is that we knew that it could allow us to create an intersection with Valley View, a full four-way intersection. We could run a road to that, create an intersection, straighten out Valley View. You'd only be 2.3 miles to I-275 interchange, which is what any end user is going to want. We also realized that if we could get 501 Loveland Madeira Road, run a road through it, that we would up the potential for 507, which is the Denise Mirror property, which is definitely stagnant. During the process of negotiations with the property owner, and we were able to identify a funding source through CDAP, which is a community economic development appraisal program. Cities receive some funding through the CDAP program, and we were able to, through two separate grant applications, the city was able to secure $372,794,000 towards the purchase and demolition of this structure. We know that, and once we were able to secure those fundings, we were able to present the property owner with a purchase agreement for $400,000, which is the price that has been the same number since the first phone call to the property owners. I will give them credit. They are wonderful people, but they've never wavered. And so with this funding, the city will be able to, best case scenario of around a $45,000 for demolition, any remediation, which Corey's already on top to. The city will be able to secure this property for only $75,000 out of their own funds. So we'll use the funding. I know the debt amount. We know the amount for the purchase is 400. You really don't know an actual amount of the demolition until we dig into it and during the inspection period. So the city was able to present the purchase agreement, which includes a 90-day inspection period. That's a period of time that the city will do their due diligence. All these people, everyone's being lined up to do this process. Ms. Brogan will have an additional 30 days after closing because she has an existing tenant in place. And we would then if we get the green light, we will do the closing. She's got 15 days after the inspection period. We would then do a closing. Then she's got up to 30 days. Doesn't sound like she's going to need all of that period of time. At that point in time, the city will go ahead and raise the building. What we've also done is the city has applied for additional CDAP grant in the amounts of $300,000 to put the roadway through. This would be a commercial grade roadway, 40 foot in width, which would also allow access to Denise. It's in the city's best interest that the Denise building gets developed. It's in the best interest of your comprehensive plan that we do this, that Denise gets this. This is all part of making all the pieces line up in place. So we're very hopeful that will also get the funding to pay for the roadway and create the intersection. If the next step would be Corey would create a TIF, we would use the future TIF dollar, that we would use the TIF funding to create the physical improvements, new signals, everything we need to make that a four-way stop, which even makes the property more desirable for a light industrial, commercial, or office use. So we're putting all the pieces in place to make this, and I think we're getting interest already because I know Corey gets multiple phone calls from people that are interested. So with that, an emergency ordinance is presented in front of you. This isn't just for the city's sake. It's out there now. Everyone knows we're interested in it. it certainly behooves the city to move quickly. I would actually sign the agreement tonight before I leave. It also behooves Ms. Brogan. She needs to deal with a tenant. And I just think it's in the city's best interest that we move forward with the process. Everything we get moving gets Corey going quicker to getting in the building race. So that's why I presented it as an emergency, because obviously now everyone knows what we've been working on for 2 years, and we certainly don't want somebody to offer $401,000. So a lot of work's gone into this. So I think an emergency request is certainly warranted here.
Thank you. Any comments or questions, Mr. Bateman?
Well, Mr. Kennedy, I just want to thank you for, and I know you've done a lot of work with this, and you're quick to certainly spread the credit around for sure. But I think that this particular this purchase of 501 Loveland Madeira Road really represents a culmination of a lot of your leadership, the vision that was required to sort of put the pieces in place to move forward with this. You extended a lot of courtesy throughout the process with the current owner, and then certainly the creativity to secure all of this funding. So I personally think that this is a really bold stroke in the scheme of things for the city, and I really want to thank you for all of your efforts. Certainly, this is probably when you first took this job, Chestnut Street was like a thorn in the side, something that got stuck under the craw of like, how am I going to get, this to be a viable, piece for the city? And it goes even further than that. Like you said, this came into the city's possession, a week after I was born. So, I mean, this was a long process to get to where we are today. So I really think that just taking a minute to thank you for all of your service that you've done. This is just a great example of how dedicated you are and how creative you are. So I think this is a great move for the city, and I'm in full support of this.
Well said, Mr. Bateman. Anyone else have any comment? Mr. Hart?
I want to echo what Mr. Bateman said first and foremost. 18 months ago plus, I remember standing in a room with a bunch of residents at one of our community engagement meetings for this document that's sitting up on all of our desks. And I remember telling a resident that about half the pages of this were a pipe dream, because I'm not sure if we can ever actually get this to happen. And here I'm sitting 18 months later through the work of city staff led by Mr. Kennedy, and this is no longer a pipe dream. This is reality. And I cannot be happier. I cannot say any nicer things or commend him any higher, or city staff any higher, for making this a reality.
Are you embarrassed yet?
No, it's been a long time.
That's right. Any other comments?
Just to
Yes, Mr.
make
Lloyd.
it real simple and real clear, we're buying a piece of property for $25,000, basically, or $75,000, because the rest of it's money that the city manager went and got for us. So something else.
Any other comment? Yes, Mr. Blair.
Plus, we're going to make a boatload of dough on this property before it's done.
It's the hope. Yes,
I
Vice
just
Mayor.
might add that the emergency nature of this legislation, in my experience, other real estate transactions have always merited that, for the reason that you want to limit the window of a third-party interloper. So I'm fine with the emergency status of this legislation.
Anyone else? All right, I can't say it any better than anybody else, but well done, Mr. Kennedy. I know Mr. Wright has been working on this as well, but Mr. Kennedy was extremely tenacious with this funding source, going back more than once. And well, how about you give us this? And I think his relationship with some of these people in the community that control these purse strings certainly benefits the city, because look what we got as a result. So well done. All right, can you read the ordinance, please?
Ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement to purchase the real property located at 501 Loveland Madeira Road, totaling .647 acres, owned by Joan Brogan and declaring an emergency.
Any comment on the ordinance? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Ping,
Yes.
Mayor Bailey,
Yes.
Mr. Bateman,
Yes.
Mr. Blair,
Yes.
Mr. Hart,
Yes.
Mr. Ori,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps.
Yes.
Ordinance 2022-77 is adopted by virtue of a vote of 7-0.
Mr. Kennedy.
So I think the city has done an extremely good job of hiring good people. And I think that's really apparent with 3 staff members that are sitting here today, Mike and Mark and Corey. We also, and I want to thank Marianne Lynn, and I feel really sorry for what Marianne's been through, but I really want to give Marianne kudos because it was Marianne Lynn who really pushed the city to open our eyes about the possibility of what a marketing and communications coordinator could do for this city. And it just seemed so foreign to me. I went into it begrudgingly, and she took it a step farther, sat there and reviewed all of the resumes. And she, I don't want to go too much at Marianne because she did a wonderful job. I know she's gone through a lot, but with that, we were able to secure the services, and we hired Krista Rose to be our marketing communications. I really didn't know what she would do because I didn't fully understand the role of the position, and she has taken it to a whole different heights. I remember Councilmember Blair saying he met with some residents, and he called me to tell me that one of the first things out of their mouth was how impressed they were with the city's written, the physical printed newsletter that we did. That was Krista from start to finish. That was not something you're all going to have to suffer through. A video she just did of us talking about the Public Works building and everything. So with that, we've always teetered with the idea that we would increase her to a full-time position. Through these discussions, through where she's at with her life, we want to increase Krista from just to 32 hours a week. She'll still have one day off during the week. And we just think it's when you hire good people, you also have to keep good people. And I think this helps secure her. 32 hours a week really is a very small fiscal impact. I won't have a significant impact on the benefits she'll now be eligible for. But for all of you that'll soon be enjoying, I'm sure everyone will go to Homerama at least once. If it seems like it's all gelled together good, Krista and Becky put that whole thing together. And that's no small thing. So this is simply an amendment to the schedule of municipal positions. I could not finish the legislation until you took the action with the water treatment plant operator. It'll be amended when it comes back with that number. It'll have 74 on it because we always repeal. This is just a good step to keep a good person. So this is just the first reading.
Any comment? I think adding 8 hours of Krista's time to the city communications is a fantastic idea, given all she already is doing. So this is just a first reading. Want to go ahead and read it, Mr. Wright?
Ordinance amending the classification for the position of Marketing Communications Coordinator position and repealing Ordinance 2022-74.
Thank you. Mr. Medler.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. There are currently 6 lighting districts in which the city pays Duke for energy charges. After compiling the charges for the year, these costs are assessed to property taxes for the property owners. These ordinances must be passed and effective before the tax assessment deadline, which is September 12, 2022. We did not receive all of the invoices in time to pass the ordinance via the normal process, which is why these items appear before you as emergencies. Otherwise, we'd be ending up waiting at least 6 more months to get these funds. And we didn't want to run the risk of just guessing what the bills would be and potentially overcharging our residents. Not a good look.
Okay. Any questions, comments? Any questions? Yes, Mr. Kemp.
I was just going to make a comment that there has been some questions in the past from various people about why these things always have to be emergencies. I think Mr. Medler has already spoken to that very well. It's interesting that Sometimes when the government moves slowly, everybody looks at that and says that's a positive thing. Sometimes when it moves quickly, everybody looks at that and says it's a positive thing. Sometimes there's people on the other side that it's always negative. It's too slow, it's too fast, or whatever. So it's just, I think it's worthwhile of pointing out that this is a necessity. It's not something where staff has not planned well and done their work in an appropriate way. It's that it's just the timing of things, and we don't have 30 days to wait. So, we have before us, I don't know how many, 7 or 6, 9. Yeah, there's a bunch of them that are emergencies, but they are under the construct of this true emergencies.
Thank you. Any further comment?
I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Blair.
I don't know if it's possible, but is there a way that we can lump we have,
Cannot.
we cannot.
Vice Mayor.
Just a question for the increase that's from prior years. Is that due to the utility charging more?
Yes, sir. It's all based on usage. Some of them have actually gone down. It depends on any number of changing light bulbs and maintenance.
Any further comment? Any comment on any of the ordinances? The first 6, anyway. All right, let's power through them, Mr. Wright.
Yes, ma'am. Ordinance assessing lighting maintenance and operation costs associated with the Brandywine on the Little Miami subdivision located in Warren County, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bateman.
Yes.
Mr. Blair.
Yes.
Mr. Hart.
Yes.
Mr. Ori.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps.
Yes.
Mr. Ping.
Yes.
Mayor Bailey.
Yes.
I'm sorry, that's bad habit. Prior community. Ordinance 2022-78 is adopted by virtue of a vote of 7-0.
Thank you. Next.
Ordinance assessing lighting maintenance and operation costs associated with the Hermitage Point subdivision located in Warren County, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Call the roll, please.
Mr. Blair.
Yes.
Mr. Hart.
Yes.
Mr. Ori.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps.
Yes.
Mr. Ping.
Yes.
Mayor Bailey. Mr. Bateman.
Yes.
Ordinance 2022-79 adopted by a vote of 7-0.
Next.
Ordinance assessing lighting maintenance and operation costs associated with the sanctuary at Miami Trail subdivision located in Claremont County, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Call the roll.
Mr. Hart.
Yes.
Mr. Ori.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps.
Yes.
Mr. Ping.
Yes.
Mayor Bailey.
Yes.
Mr. Bateman.
Yes.
Mr. Blair.
Yes.
Ordinance 2022-80 is adopted 7-0.
Next.
Ordinance assessing lighting maintenance and operation costs associated with the White Pillars Phase 1 subdivision located in Claremont County, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Call the roll, please.
Mr. Ori.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps.
Yes.
Mr. Ping.
Yes.
Mayor Bailey. Mr. Bateman.
Yes.
Mr. Blair.
Yes.
Mr. Hart.
Yes.
Ordinance 2022-81 adopted 7-0.
Next.
Ordinance assessing lighting maintenance and operation costs associated with the White Pillars Phase 2B subdivision in Claremont County, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Call the roll, please.
Vice Mayor Phelps.
Yes.
Mr. Ping.
Yes.
Mayor Bailey.
Yes.
Mr. Bateman.
Yes.
Mr. Blair.
Yes.
Mr. Hart.
Yes.
Mr. Ori.
Yes.
Ordinance 2022-82 adopted by virtue of a vote of 7-0.
Next.
Ordinance assessing lighting, maintenance, and operation costs associated with the White Pillars Phase 3 subdivision located in Claremont County, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Call the roll, please.
Mr. Ping.
Yes.
Mayor Bailey.
Yes.
Mr. Bateman.
Yes.
Mr. Blair.
Yes.
Mr. Hart.
Yes.
Mr. Ori.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps.
Yes.
Ordinance 2022-83 adopted 7-0.
Mr. Medler, do you want to give a brief introduction of these 3?
Well, the next 3 are the quarterly items for utility assessments for unpaid bills. These are on emergencies because if we have them out there and then somebody comes in and makes a payment, the whole item has to be redone. It becomes voided. And then that just starts the clock over again. And if then a month later somebody makes a payment, then you start over again and again. And it's hard to get things finalized. So that's why these are emergencies.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Medler or any questions on the ordinances? Yes.
Quick question. Some of these names appear every time. Are these carryovers still, or are they new charges?
So most of them are carryovers, and a lot of the examples happen if the homeowner passes away or there's a foreclosure and the property ends up getting in a court issue, and it might sometimes takes years for those issues to be resolved.
But the amounts that are on here are what that would be the totals.
The total that's being added to.
If there was already one assessed,
This is a new one.
this is a new one.
Right.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments? All right, go ahead and read the first ordinance, please.
Ordinance assessing liens for unpaid utility bills on property in Claremont County owed to the city of Loveland and declaring an emergency.
Call the roll, please.
Mayor Bailey,
Yes.
Mr. Bateman,
Yes.
Mr. Blair,
Yes.
Mr. Hart,
Yes.
Mr. Ori,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps,
Yes.
Mr. Ping.
Yes.
Ordinance 2022-84 adopted 7-0.
Read the next ordinance.
Ordinance assessing liens for unpaid utility bills on property in Claremont County owed to city of Loveland and declaring an emergency.
Call the roll.
Mr. Bateman,
Yes.
Mr. Blair,
Yes.
Mr. Hart,
Yes.
Mr. Ori,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps,
Yes.
Mr. Ping,
Yes.
Mayor Bailey.
Yes.
Ordinance 2022-85 adopted 7-0.
Last ordinance.
Ordinance assessing liens for unpaid utility bills on property in Warren County owed to the city of Loveland and declaring an emergency.
Call the roll.
Mr. Blair,
Yes.
Mr. Hart,
Yes.
Mr. Ori,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps,
Yes.
Mr. Ping,
Yes.
Mayor Bailey,
Yes.
Mr. Bateman,
Yes.
that's it. Ordinance 2022-86 adopted 7-0.
Mr. Kennedy.
This is this memo accompanies a request that the city council set a public hearing to review the proposed downtown streetscape plan for September 27th, 2022. I just think it was important to note that on July 24th, when city council first started the series of selected a consultant to do the downtown streetscape plan, that this city then completed a master plan, completed a Nisbet Park master plan, and then created a streetscape plan. Also received, put together a committee just to select a site for a fire station. And I think that's truly to be commended upon city council. We're growing, but at the same time, we're taking the time to put together a plan. A streetscape plan is more in line with the Nisbet Park plan because it's more of a tool. It'll be used very readily in grant applications. It'll be cited. It'll be quoted. It's a budget tool. It's the Nisbet Park master plan is open while we're doing the budget. So while it's a plan, it's different than a downtown plan or a comprehensive plan. It's more of a shorter term, more like a 5-year scope before. And I don't want to go into a lot of detail because I don't think it's fair to the public. You say you're gonna have a public hearing, then you talk about it before it. So, but I did want to just talk about what we did that this committee. First and foremost, when the mayor and I thought about this, we felt that it was important that we put 2 members on the Tree and Environment Committee, 2 members on the Historic Preservation Committee, and 1 building business owner, somebody who's got skin in the game, and that was Gloria. The Tree and Environment was Doug Gilbert and John Robinson, and Katie Coulson was on the Historic Preservation. We started this in Mary Ann Lynn. The focus of the plan, and one of the reasons that there was a need for Treescope, I think goes back to residents, what Cindy Kessler has been sort of pounding home with all of you, which is the need that we improve our greenscape. I don't know if that's really a word, but I did see it in it. And she's right. And that's why it was important to bring in Doug and John, and they played a big role. And so that was an important part of it. And also, for me, from a financial side, we didn't put any restrictions on KZF when we hired KZF to do the streetscape plan. But we certainly don't want to go back against things we've already accomplished. So my only thing with Lynn was give us a guide that we can use for grants. We need to green up downtown within reason. But we also needed to not go backwards on things we've accomplished. If you think about it, our new sidewalk design, if you look at Jackson Street Market, if you look at the improvements around the downtown clock, if you wait till you see the landscaping that's going in along the bike trail, we've the pocket park in front of City Hall. We work within what we've done because we haven't stopped doing things downtown simply because we were doing a streetscape plan. And I'll be honest with you, that's why Lynn was the perfect person to do it, because she gets it. So with that, the Streetscape Committee felt it was important that we take this to the public. And just like when John and the committee brought you the comprehensive plan, we don't expect you to act on it the day you get it. So you've got a month. The 27th, Krista will certainly let the public know. It'll be front and center on the website for people to click on it. I think it's an exciting plan. It's pretty cool. It's got some pretty bold moves that you'll see. I haven't really ran those past Odd yet, but it's got some pretty bold plans that in front of it. But if you look at that come into fruition, and look at some of them sectional drawings that she gives you, that's when she gives you sort of a bird's eye view with the people. It really brings it home on what this could look like, and safety is a key, and it's really brings it all home. So all you would need is a motion just to set a public hearing for 9/27/2022.
Is there any comment before we take a motion? All right, would someone care to make that motion?
Move to set a public hearing on September 27 on the streetscape plan.
Or second?
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mr. Ori?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps?
Yes.
Mr. Ping?
Yes.
Mayor Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, I think the only matter left is on the last page of your agenda. We did have a member of our Board of Zoning Appeals that recently moved out of city limits and has resigned from that board. So we need to appoint someone just to fill that partial term that expires at the end of this year. I'm recommending that we appoint David Black to the Board of Zoning Appeals for that partial term. And would request a motion affirming that recommendation.
So moved.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Mr. Ori?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps?
Yes.
Mr. Ping?
Yes.
Mayor Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mr. Blair?
Yep.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, upcoming events. This Sunday coming up is My Brother's Keeper. They will perform at Nisbet Park as part of our Concert in the Park series. Begins at 6 p.m. Homerama at Chimney Ridge begins September 3rd, runs through the 18th. Whistle Stop Playworks will host their 5th annual Pottery Affair on September 3rd from 11 to 4. Little Miami River Chamber Alliance will host the Frogman Race on September 10th. And the 5th annual Green Beret 5K will be held on September 11th to benefit the Green Beret Foundation. You can sign up for that at www.greenberetfoundation.org. Does anybody else have any comments, announcements of any kind? We have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Call the roll, please.
Vice Mayor Phelps?
Yes.
Mr. Ping?
Yes.
Mayor Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mr. Blair?
Yep.
Mr. Hart?
Yep.
Mr. Ori?
Yes.
We're adjourned at 8:46 p.m.
Jeez. I have the folder.
Oh, man.